Okay, let's unpack this. We have a genuinely unique deep dive today that feels less like a historical analysis and more like a study in, well, in shared destiny.
It really does. We're dealing with a stack of source material that spans 2 full centuries.
Right. It's everything from, digitized architectural career documents and some really raw personal notes from our time.
All the way back to the intimate, leather-bound journals of an 18th century European countess.
So please do unpack it, because the mission here feels intensely personal.
Oh, absolutely. We are following the trajectory of an American architect. His name is Charlie Waterston. And his life has, there's no other way to put it, it has utterly, spectacularly imploded.
Forcing him onto this path of what the sources call involuntary self-discovery.
Yes, in the Massachusetts countryside of all places. And what anchors his entire journey, what guides him, is the written legacy of a woman who lived 200 years before him.
It's a fascinating concept, isn't it? This idea of involuntary self-discovery being guided by a ghostwriter from the past, almost.
Almost literally, as we'll see.
The whole core conflict, it really kicks off with Charlie's return to New York. He's 42, described in the notes as, tall, athletic, successful.
Or at least he was successful.
Right, until he was left by his wife, Carol, for a man named Simon.
And the sources are, they're unflinching about his state of mind. He describes the moment Carol broke the news as feeling like a rock crushing his heart. But the real tragedy, the thing that comes through so clearly in his notes, it wasn't just the pain, it was the shock.
The shock, right. He felt absolute blindness. He genuinely believed they were completely happy, right up until the second she confessed.
Total blindness.
And here is where it gets really, really interesting. Because that devastation, that absolute personal and professional implosion, it sparks this spontaneous, completely unplanned escape, a flight north.
Yeah.
And that detour is what lands him in Shelburne Falls, Massachusetts. It leads him directly to this centuries-old property, a small French chateau.
And a mystery that ends up providing the very architectural blueprint for the freedom and the courage he is so desperate to find.
So let's start with that seismic event. The thing that sent Charlie running in the first place. That immediate aftermath of losing Carol.
The sources suggest his deepest wound wasn't even heartbreak, it was
humiliation.
Exactly, humiliation. He just felt so stupid.
And that feeling of stupidity is key, isn't it? Because it speaks to this profound lack of self-awareness.
Oh, completely. Here's a man who is a high-functioning architect. He's operating on an international level, building these complex structures.
And yet he was totally blind to the fact that his own 9-year marriage was itself a hollow structure.
Perfectly put. And Carol's later assessment is just devastatingly accurate. She realized they were, and this is a direct quote, 2 self-centered people moving along side by side, barely touching and never meeting.
Oof. That's brutal.
It is. But what's so striking is that Charlie, even after she delivered that analysis, he still didn't get it.
He still didn't see the fundamental distance in their relationship.
Not at all. He was so wrapped up in his own success, his routine, his world, that he just hadn't noticed the connection had completely frayed.
And the separation itself sounds like it was just deeply uncomfortable. Carol, in this really bizarre way, was goddamn honest about it all. She told him she loved Simon, yes, but she also admitted she still loved Charlie, too. She just felt compelled to choose Simon.
Which probably has more to do with Simon than with Charlie. The sources suggest Simon was far more demanding. We see this pattern of control even in the aftermath.
Yes, so?
Well, Simon wanted to marry her immediately, and he saw Charlie's grief as just a hurdle, an inconvenience.
The notes say Simon thought Charlie was being an incredibly bad sport about the divorce.
Can you imagine? Think about the psychological impact that has on Charlie. Not only did his marriage fail, but the man replacing him is treating his legitimate human pain as some kind of inconvenient temper tantrum.
His grief is being pathologized, minimized.
Exactly. Which only compounds the initial pain. It's just layer upon layer of dismissal.
And that emotional battering, it follows him directly into his professional life.
Directly. He reluctantly accepts this new appointment in the New York office, but the notes make it absolutely clear he hated leaving London.
That's where he'd built his career, his happiness.
Everything. And he did not see the New York move as a step up. Not in any way.
Let's talk about that contrast, because it seems to illuminate Charlie's whole creative identity.
It does. In London and Europe, his office was thriving. They were generating, and this is from the firm's own documents, the lion's share of the firm's income, along with the Tokyo office.
And why was that?
Because they were doing exciting, innovative design work. London was perceived by the New York headquarters as this sort of eccentric outpost.
Which, paradoxically, gave him freedom.
The critical freedom and insulation he needed to actually push boundaries, his work there was genuinely original.
So when he lands in New York, the toxicity just hits him instantly.
Like a wall. He senses a palpable aura of tension. It wasn't just that the design work was conservative, it was a hostile social environment.
Associates were constantly jockeying for position.
Right. There was, as he puts it, no sense of a team. It was every man for himself.
And you see Charlie's personal blindness kind of mirrored here. Just like you failed to see the rot in his marriage.
He seemed totally oblivious to how much the New York office had stagnated until he was forced back into it.
The designs were surprisingly conservative.
And far less advanced than Europe.
Hmm.
The sources practically describe a time capsule.
Right.
You get the sense that while London was pursuing cutting-edge, sustainable biophilic design or modular construction...
New York was stuck in some postmodern pastiche from, what, decades ago?
Exactly. They were just churning out the same old stuff.
And the absolute root of this conservatism, it was the senior partners, wasn't it? Bill Jones and Arthur Whitaker.
They were described as ultra-conservative. They hated to take chances. They preferred the old ways.
The office hadn't generated a single original idea in a decade.
The exact decade Charlie had been happily working overseas. It's no coincidence.
So he was a creative powerhouse, dropped into what was essentially a professional graveyard.
And the source material just captures his profound frustration. He saw himself as being reduced to a monitor on a playground, not an architect, not a designer.
He hated that they were recycling old designs.
Just fitting these safe, familiar blocks together. His most brutal assessment, I think, was that they were acting more like contractors than designers.
Meaning they sacrificed the whole visionary aspect of architecture for what?
Well,
Safe, billable, repetitive formulas.
precisely. It was about managing risk, not creating art.
It sounds like the partners were actually maybe relieved to get rid of him. Was this sabbatical he takes truly an escape, or was it more like a quiet, long-delayed firing?
That's an excellent point. It was. It was a mutually convenient ejection. This professional sterility, this creative death, it coincided perfectly with his absolute personal low point, Thanksgiving.
Oh, this scene is just, it's so bleak.
Isn't it? Charlie lies to the partners. He tells them he has cousins in Boston just to avoid them.
And the sources paint this very lonely, miserable picture. He's sitting alone in his tiny rented studio in the East 50s.
Eating ordered-in pizza, watching meaningless football on TV, and just feeling this profound hatred for his entire situation.
And that intersection of absolute misery, personal and professional, that's what creates the moment of freedom.
It's the catalyst. He goes into a closed meeting with Jones and Whitaker about this highly contentious Phoenix project.
And feeling he had, quote, already lost everything he cared about when Carol left, Charlie experienced what the notes call a strange rush of freedom.
It's the freedom of the completely ruined man.
Right, when you have nothing left to lose.
You have all the power in the world. He just confronts them directly. He asks, why stay?
And the partners, who are undoubtedly relieved to shed 6 months of his salary, they just agree to the sabbatical.
And they frame it as, recovery time from the Carol problems.
A convenient excuse for everyone.
It is, and Charlie recognizes the gift for what it is. He leaves the very next morning with a rented car, 2 bags, and just maps. Not a destination, just maps of New England.
He went from directing these massive global architectural projects to being a man simply running from the emotional and professional concrete walls that were closing in on him. That's a radical pivot.
It's a complete erasure of his old life.
So Charlie just drives north. He's originally aiming for Vermont to ski, but heavy snow forces him to stop, totally spontaneously, in Shelburne Falls, Massachusetts.
And this is it. This is where his involuntary self-discovery begins.
He immediately finds an anchor, right?
Yeah.
A woman named Gladys Palmer.
Yes, a charming, highly cultured 70-year-old widow. She rents rooms in warmer weather, but she takes him on, and she instantly becomes his landlady and what the sources call his surrogate family.
Gladys's own life story, which is revealed in the notes, it feels crucial because it provides the kind of scale Charlie desperately needs.
It's absolutely crucial. She's a native of Shelburne Falls, a widow, and she has suffered a catastrophic, unimaginable loss.
Her son, her daughter-in-law, and her 5-year-old grandchild, Jimmy, Kathleen, and Peggy. They all died together.
All at once. And then her husband, Roland, a visiting scholar from England, passed away just 3 years after that tragedy. She describes the persistent pain as feeling like a limb long lost but still remembered.
But her survival, her endurance, it gives her this moral authority to challenge Charlie's paralyzing grief.
Yes, she acknowledges the depth of his sorrow, of course, but she asserts, with the full weight of her own experience, that you only have a right to so much time for mourning.
Wow.
And this message, coming from someone who had endured the sequential loss of her entire immediate family, it struck Charlie hard.
He realized he was wasting precious time mourning a marriage that Carol herself had confirmed was already dead years ago.
Gladys essentially gave him permission, or maybe more accurately, a command to move on.
And this movement, this shift, it leads him directly to the core historical hook of our deep dive. The ghostly chateau.
The chateau. Gladys owns this stunning property about 5 miles away, a beautifully built, perfectly proportioned small chateau overlooking the Deerfield River.
Built around 1790 by a French count, François de Pellerin, who was a cousin of Lafayette, for a lady.
And as an architect, Charlie feels this intense, almost physical pull to the building.
He believes that houses had souls and destinies.
And he felt this structure was actively reaching out to him. It was the complete opposite of the recycled, soul-crushing conservatism of the New York office.
Yeah.
This house had a story.
He desperately wants to rent it.
Desperately. And Gladys, trusting his architectural respect for the place, she agrees. She just makes him promise to cherish it, to maintain it.
A chateau becomes his sanctuary. But then the historical narrative literally breaks through the present. On Christmas Eve, Charlie, now settled in, sees a vision. A woman in a white gown standing in his bedroom.
A room that Gladys had already confirmed was Sarah's former room, the very room where she bore her children.
This is the moment a skeptic is converted, right?
Absolutely. Charlie tries to rationalize it. He thinks, a trick of the light, a dream, a neighbor wandering by.
But when he checks outside,
there are no tracks there other than his own going in and out.
So he's forced to conclude the vision had definitely not been human.
He had seen Sarah. The past has now claimed a tangible, physical presence in his present.
So in order to understand this ghost, this house, this whole history, Charlie goes to the local historical society, which is, amusingly, right next door to the hardware store.
And here he meets another key human anchor in his story, Francesca Virenay.
The curator.
The curator at the desk. She's described as beautiful big green eyes, dark auburn hair, but she is immediately cold. Rude, even.
And seems filled with, and this is a quote, sorrow and hatred.
She treats the historical couple's story with this real disdain. She calls it a sweet story that's polluted by myths and legends that she clearly resents.
Wait, hang on. The source's describe her as being filled with hatred? That's an intense word. Why so much hostility toward a friendly visitor just asking about local history?
It's a mechanism of protection, as the sources later reveal. She is deeply, deeply wounded, and local history, especially a story centered on romance and courage, likely feels like a sentimental lie compared to her own reality.
So she's actively rejecting anything that smells of optimism or traditional happiness.
Pretty much. But despite her hostility, Charlie manages to find a drawing of Sarah in a book she hands him.
And he's floored. The likeness was extraordinary.
It captures the same huge blue eyes and expression as the ghost he had seen on Christmas Eve.
So that drawing is the final confirmation he needs.
It is. The story isn't a myth, the ghost is real, and the historical figure now has a face. It cements his obsession. He realizes this is more than just some historical research project.
It's an investigation into a shared fate. And that transition brings us right into Sarah Ferguson's narrative. The life Charlie will soon be devouring in her journals. And the sources, they detail an existence that began in just absolute terror and injustice.
In 18th century England, Sarah Ferguson was not a person. She was an asset.
She was traded at the age of 16 for a good-sized piece of land.
Traded. And married to Edward, the Earl of Balfour, who was 54 years old.
Her father assured everyone she needed an older man for guidance.
But in reality, it was a financial transaction, plain and simple, and she became a prisoner of the estate.
And the 8 years that followed were just horrific.
Unspeakably so. Edward was a brutal, greedy man. His jealousy turned quickly and often to abuse. The sources are explicit. Sarah was beaten, abused, detested, scorned.
She spent those years trying to fulfill her only function, which was to give him an heir.
And in the process, she suffered the death of 3 sons and 1 infant.
The source notes really emphasize her terror. She hated having to sleep with him, and she lived in constant fear that he would kill her, either through the abuse or just through the trauma of repeated childbirth.
This historical context is so vital to scaling Charlie's pain.
Right.
Charlie lost a marriage that was empty. Sarah was trying to survive a marriage that was actively homicidal.
Her turning point, the moment the escape was conceived, came during Edward's grave injury.
Yes. He was suffering from what the sources suggest was severe internal bleeding. It required bleeding and leeching, these primitive, often ineffective medical practices of the time.
And Sarah sat by his bed.
Yeah.
And in that moment, she didn't feel pity or even, traditional wifely concern.
No, she felt only indifference, and she prayed silently for him to die. It was a moment of absolute cold clarity about her own survival.
But he recovered.
He recovered, and he became, quote, worse than ever.
Actively threatening her, vowing to squeeze an air from her loins yet.
Which just confirmed her worst fear. She could not stay. If she stayed, she would either be killed by him or she would simply bleed out in childbirth, trying to produce his desired successor.
So the planning of her flight, which is detailed in the sources, shows this remarkable cold-blooded focus.
Meticulous, she confides in Margaret, her devoted serving girl, who promises to follow her anywhere.
And then Sarah uses her most valuable, easily transferable asset, a ruby bracelet.
She leaves it with a contact in Falmouth to pay for passage to Boston on the Concord, a small, two-masted brig that was sailing in 3 weeks. This entire plan was executed with the precision of a covert military operation.
But the reality of radical change of any big plan is that something always goes wrong.
Always. When Margaret, her serving girl, realized the voyage to Boston would take a minimum of 6 weeks across the Atlantic,
She became hysterical and backed out.
which left Sarah in this incredibly vulnerable, almost impossible position for a woman of her standing at that time.
She was forced to travel alone, which was most unseemly in 1789.
So she had to instantly invent a respectable cover story.
She traveled in a simple black wool gown and a silk hat, claiming to be a recent widow traveling to settle her husband's affairs in America.
A plausible story, and her excuse for her lack of a companion, her niece, Margaret, had been too frightened to make the journey.
A total fabrication, but a necessary one for her survival and acceptance among the other passengers.
Absolutely.
And the voyage itself is a brutal test of her physical and mental endurance.
Oh, it was fraught with storms, chronic seasickness, profound misery. But she connects with a family, the Jordans, who are heading to Ohio.
And Martha Jordan, who was 4 months pregnant, was violently ill for weeks.
The sources detail the failure of the pharmacist's remedies, the hopelessness of it, and eventually, just 10 days after the first sighting of land, Martha died.
Imagine the sheer emotional discipline it took for Sarah. She's watching a fellow passenger die, and then just 10 days later, she receives a marriage proposal.
From the grieving husband.
Right.
Seth Jordan, Martha's distraught husband, he approached Sarah with a proposal. He said he couldn't raise their daughter, Hannah, alone, and he recognized Sarah's quiet strength and competence amidst all that chaos.
And the fact that she gently declined shows her absolute refusal to be owned or defined by a man ever again, no matter how desperate the circumstance.
Exactly. She was not trading one form of dependence for another.
The crossing took exactly 7 weeks and 4 days. They arrived in Boston on October 28, 1789. And despite the entire ordeal, Sarah's focus remained unwavering.
She wasn't seeking comfort. She wasn't seeking high society. She was seeking a place where she could finally enjoy her exhilaration and independence.
So Boston for her was just a supply depot.
Strictly a supply depot. She immediately converted her assets into capital. She had a diamond necklace that Edward had somehow overlooked,
Which she sold to a jeweler, depositing a handsome sum in the bank.
She was practical, she was cautious, and now, for the first time in her life, she was financially autonomous, a revolutionary state for a woman of her time.
But she had to participate in society, at least minimally.
She did. She was introduced into the elite social circles by her bank manager, Angus Blake, and his wife. She bought serviceable clothes, but she allowed herself one small indulgence.
A deep blue velvet gown.
Yes.
And her presence, even though she was trying to keep a low profile, was magnetic.
It was. She attracted many eligible men. Lieutenant Parker is mentioned as being a particularly persistent suitor.
But she skillfully deflected all of them.
She made it a point to converse mainly with women, or she'd restrict her conversations with men to topics like business and farming. She maintained a firm, unshakable stance. I don't intend to marry again.
She was protecting the freedom she had literally risked her life to gain.
making sure no connection, no rumor could ever travel back across the Atlantic to Edward.
So Sarah's commitment to self-determination meant she had to avoid the easy trap of elite Boston society.
Absolutely. Her sights were set on the unknown, on the wilderness, the settlement of Deerfield.
And she was fully aware of the discomfort and the very real dangers of that 4 or 5 day winter journey.
Oh, yes. It included navigating around garrisons, stockades, and the active presence of Native American tribes. This was not a trip for the faint of heart.
It was an incredible act of historical defiance. For a well-bred European woman to insist on a journey like that, into the frontier alone.
It required an immense amount of social and physical nerve. Colonel Stockbridge, to his credit, assisted her. He arranged 2 guides and a driver.
And they reached the garrison just before midnight. But her hunger for freedom was so powerful, the sources say, that she couldn't sleep.
She couldn't. So she goes for a walk, late at night, alone in the snow, essentially wandering into the wilderness.
Where she's immediately confronted by a warrior.
Yes. Who tells her, very directly, "You don't belong here. It is dangerous for you here."
And this is a classic frontier moment, isn't it? The clash of worlds.
It is, and when she responded that she had nowhere else now, he looked at her with this mix of surprise and confusion. He perceived what the notes call the stupidity and innocence of settlers like her who just wandered into peril.
That encounter really sets the stage for the revelation of François.
It does. The very next morning, refusing to be curtailed by that initial danger, she insisted on riding nearly 12 miles further to see Shelburne Falls.
She was drawn by the descriptions of its spectacular waterfall.
But on the dangerous return trip, lost in the heavy woods, they were intercepted by a group of Native Americans.
And the warrior who found and returned her to the garrison was revealed by the colonel.
As François de Pellerin.
Sarah was in utter confusion and intensely livid that he had let her believe he was an attacking Indian.
I mean, she had risked her life to see the falls, and this man had intentionally tried to terrify her. She was furious.
But François had his reasons. He was no ordinary French count.
Not at all. He was a cousin of Lafayette who had served in the Revolution, but he had undergone this radical assimilation into the Iroquois culture.
He'd been accepted by the powerful chief Red Jacket almost as a son.
And his deep commitment to the tribes, it stemmed from a very personal tragedy.
That tragedy is crucial to understanding him, isn't it?
Absolutely. His first wife, Crying Sparrow, and their infant son had been killed by the Huron. This profound loss led him to adopt the Iroquois ways completely. He often rode in buckskins, wore a bear claw necklace. He was a man split between 2 worlds, the European aristocracy and the American wilderness.
So despite that initial confusion and anger, Sarah established her new life. She found a clearing near Shelburne and set up a simple log cabin farm.
Hiring 2 Irish hands, Patrick and John, to help run it. She was building her independence, brick by metaphorical brick.
And 6 months later, François returned.
He did, and Sarah was still fiercely angry about the terror he had caused her.
But that tension, it broke down into real candor.
It did. François apologized. He explained he'd wanted to frighten her back to Boston, believing the frontier would consume her. He thought he was saving her from herself.
And the confessions that followed, that's the real foundation of their bond.
Yes. Sarah laid bare her 8 years as Edward's prisoner. She said, "I was traded at the age of 16 for a good-sized piece of land."
And François, in turn, shared his overwhelming grief and his decision to live entirely within the Iroquois structure.
They realized they were 2 people who had fundamentally broken with their pasts. They had both survived devastating, world-changing trauma. They shared this deep, unspoken bond.
The relationship moved quickly from respect to love.
They became lovers, and François formalized their union in this uniquely personal, unconventional way.
He gave her a small, diamond-studded gold wedding band that he had traded for months before.
And they exchanged their vows at the very place Sarah had risked her life to see, the waterfall.
His justification for this unconventional marriage was so powerful and liberating for her.
It was. He argued she was never truly married to Edward. That was a legal and physical imprisonment, not a union.
He told her they were now married in our own eyes and the eyes of God.
A complete repudiation of the aristocratic European structure that had enslaved her.
But the past, in the form of Edward, it attempted one final menacing intrusion.
A lawyer named Johnston tracked Sarah down. He demanded she sign away any claim to Edward's inheritance. Johnston was, essentially, a legal threat designed to harass and intimidate her.
This scene is just, it's high drama, and it shows the completeness of François' commitment.
It really does. He learned of the lawyer's mission from an old nanotech guide, and Francois burst into the kitchen while Johnston was bullying Sarah.
Wearing full winter Indian garb.
Yes, including bobcat heads and a bib of bones, the whole 9 yards, all designed to absolutely terrify the lawyer.
And the tactic was devastatingly effective.
Johnston, fearing for his very life out there in the wilderness, fled the chateau and never returned.
And it's then that Sarah learned two crucial facts.
Yes. First, that Edward had murdered his own brother, Haversham, and second, that Edward himself was finally dead, killed in a hunting accident. She was completely, totally free.
And what did she do with this immense freedom, this huge inheritance she refused it?
All of it. The sources indicate she suggested the vast fortune and title go to Edward's sister-in-law and his nieces. She wanted absolutely nothing, not even the title that connected her to her painful past.
Her true prize was the future.
Exactly. And Francois made good on his commitment to her. They built the small, perfectly proportioned chateau, the very home Charlie would later rent, at a beautiful spot overlooking the valley.
And they filled it with life. They had 3 children.
Alexandra Andre, or Running Pony, who was born after a long, terrifying labor. Then Francois's Eugenie Sarah, born almost instantly by the roadside just 10 months later, a true reversal of all the infant deaths she'd suffered before.
And finally, Marie-Ange, born 2 years after that in the very bedroom Charlie now slept in. However, Francois was a man defined by his honor and his obligation to the frontier.
He was. And despite Sarah's intense worry and her pleas, he continued to ride with the army, negotiating with leaders like Blue Jacket and Tecumseh.
It was a commitment Sarah understood, but could never fully accept.
And the journals, they end on this note of deep, abiding sorrow. Sarah never saw him in the clearing again after his last departure for the Western Army.
She lived to be 80 in the chateau.
Having never loved another man, sustained only by their shared history and their children.
That is just a staggering narrative of pain and escape and radical self-creation, and it all became this tangible gift, a healing blueprint for Charlie.
It did. And the physical discovery of the journals is paramount to this whole story.
Charlie heard a strange noise in the attic. He investigated, and he found this battered, locked trunk tucked away.
And inside were 12 small, leather-bound books, Sarah's journals, starting from her escape in 1789.
And he became completely immersed, utterly obsessed.
He read her words, and she became, quote, more alive to him than any living woman.
He finished that first journal at 4 a.m. and was just deeply moved by her uncompromising courage. Her escape from a man who wanted to, and this phrase is horrifying, squeeze an air from her loins.
Horrifying. And he kept the journals a secret. He felt that Sarah belonged to him for the moment. It was this profoundly intimate conversation across 2 centuries.
And the power of the journals lies in the scale they provided him.
Yes. Charlie's current problem, a narcissistic ex-wife, a toxic job, it felt monumental to him. But when you place that against a woman who literally escaped a murderer on a transatlantic brig,
his problems suddenly shrink into manageable proportion.
Exactly. And this newfound perspective, it is perfectly timed with his second encounter with the frosty Francesca Veronese.
That encounter happens at the Charlemont ski resort, where Francesca is with her 8-year-old daughter, Monique.
And Charlie discovers that Francesca, just like him, is reeling from an incredibly painful and humiliating public divorce.
The parallels here are so striking, but the nature of the betrayal is, it's very modernized.
It is. Her husband, Pierre Veronese, was a celebrated French sportscaster and an Olympic ski champion. He left her for a younger champion named Marie-Lise.
And the sources note that the affair and Marie-Lise's subsequent pregnancy were publicized on national French TV.
During the Olympics.
The ultimate public humiliation.
Devastating. So Francesca, utterly destroyed, fled Paris for Shelburne Falls, where she admitted she used to just cry all the time.
So on the surface, they're both survivors of betrayal by experts. Charlie by his wife, Francesca by her champion husband.
Right. Francesca was told she was too wrapped up in Monique. Charlie believed his marriage was blissfully happy.
Both had their egos crushed and their realities just shattered by people who were, quite frankly, incredibly self-centered.
And Francesca's initial demeanor, that moody, reserved, hostile front, it was entirely understandable now.
She was deeply humiliated by the public nature of her betrayal.
And Charlie recognized her as a wounded animal deep in a cave, terrified to trust or be vulnerable again. Her hostility was a defense mechanism built against a world that had mocked her.
So Charlie, having absorbed Sarah's story, makes this profoundly selfless, almost therapeutic decision. He shares the journals.
He does. He recognized that Sarah's journey of uncompromising courage was exactly the dose of perspective Francesca needed to stop viewing her life as a public failure.
He gives her the first journal to read, calling it Alone.
And the impact is instant and profound. Reading about Sarah's fight for physical survival against the murderous Earl of Balfour, her terrifying voyage, her building a life from absolute scratch.
That's a true catalyst for Francesca's healing.
It is. She tells Charlie that Sarah's story made her realize that all that stuff that happened to me was so unimportant. Her own humiliation, viewed against Sarah's life or death battle, it just shrinks to an insignificant social problem.
And this shared secret, it completely shatters her icy exterior.
Completely. She starts to genuinely open up. She's laughing. She finally agrees to a real date with Charlie, something she had previously shot down fiercely.
It's the first sign that Charlie, too, is finally ready to live again.
And Charlie's experience, it culminates in this beautiful symbolic release after he finishes the last journal, which chronicles Sarah's long, fulfilling life in the chateau after François' death.
He hears the rustle of a silk skirt moving across the floor.
And he sees a shape in a blue gown, likely Sarah's favored blue velvet dress. He believes it was Sarah, come to say goodbye, recognizing her story had completed its purpose for him.
The ultimate synthesis for Charlie is this realization that he has spent too much time on the outside now.
Just watching other people's lives, Francesca and Monique, Carole and Simon, Sarah and Francois.
And he finally understands that the relationship he wants is the one Sarah and Francois built.
One based on raw honesty, deep love, and a shared commitment to forging a new identity together, even through intense hardship.
Sarah was not afraid to start over. She wasn't afraid to sail into the unknown, despite the monstrous betrayal she faced.
And that realization becomes Charlie's new architectural brief for his own life. His sabbatical was never really about recovering from the Carole problems.
It was about finding the courage to design something genuinely new for himself. So let's bring this all back to the core concept of this deep dive. When we synthesize Charlie and Sarah's experiences, what we see are two interwoven narratives, separated by 2 centuries, but anchored by the exact same theme.
Radical reinvention, fueled by historical perspective.
Charlie was initially just running away, running from a painful past, the betrayal, the toxic career, but he found inspiration not by, looking forward or indulging in therapy,
but by accidentally unlocking a dramatic historical life. Sarah's journals provided the necessary emotional scale for his own grief. It transformed his personal crisis from a collapse into a launch pad.
And the sources really demonstrate that finding true freedom requires both a historical context,
Sarah leaving a known aristocratic world for an unknown, dangerous wilderness,
and profound emotional courage.
Which is Charlie leaving the financial safety of his firm and opening up his wounded heart to the guarded Francesca.
The power of the places themselves anchors this whole story, too. The chateau, meticulously built by Francois for Sarah, it became the physical haven where Charlie healed and discovered his purpose.
Right. And the waterfall, where Sarah and Francois exchanged their vows, it symbolized this purity of commitment that Charlie had never experienced with Carole.
Even the historical society, initially a source of Francesca's coldness, it became the spot where Charlie connected with her and found the drawing that gave Sarah her face.
These places acted as temporal crossroads, bridges between their 2 timelines.
So ultimately for Charlie, finding his place in the present meant understanding the raw, uncompromising courage of the past.
Sarah's journey proved that even after the deepest betrayal, the worst abuse, the most profound loss, it is absolutely possible to repudiate that past, to find true love, and to build a completely new life entirely on one's own terms.
He traded conservative architecture for the architecture of the self.
Well said. Which raises an important question for you, the listener. Charlie's decision to leave his job and take a sabbatical was the wildest thing he had ever done. Yet he found the strength to rebuild by reading about a woman who sailed alone across the Atlantic to escape a literal murderer. So if that historical bravery gave him the blueprint for his future, what ancient, forgotten, or hidden histories are waiting in your own world? In your family, in your local library, maybe in your attic. Histories that might unlock the courage you need today.
Go explore.